Hello, everyone, and welcome to our workshop about if you're interested in applying for a tribal child support program. My name is Melissa Johnson. I'm the director for our Division of Regional Operations in the Federal Office of Child Support Enforcement. I'll be facilitating and speaking during today's workshop, and I'll also be joined by Chad Sawyer. Chad is a senior policy program specialist within the Division of Policy and Training. Give a good wave, Chad. And we are so fortunate as well that we have two tribal child support directors joining us that can share perspectives and benefits on having a child support program in their communities. You'll hear from Linda Moser-Boos, who's the child support director at Ho-Chunk Nation, and Amy Turner, who's the director of the Delaware Tribe of Indians Family and Children's Services Division. Thank you all for joining us today. We are excited to have you on this day one first workshop of the ACF Indigenous Programs Conference. Before we begin, we will have some instructions on how you can interact during this session. Chelsea Logan is joining us as well, and she serves as our room monitor. Chelsea, do you have a few updates about how they can interact that you can share?
Yes. Hello and welcome everyone. My name is Chelsea Logan and I will be the ACF room monitor for this workshop. I'm sharing quick housekeeping items before I turn it over to our presenters today. If you have questions during the presentation, please submit them in the chat box. I will monitor and record these for the Q&A session. If you have any questions during the Q&A session, please raise your Zoom hand located at the bottom of your screen or submit your questions in the chat box. We will try to get as many questions as possible. Please note that I have provided a survey link for the workshop session in the chat box. We would appreciate capturing your feedback and thoughts on this session, which you can do by taking this survey after this workshop. We'll provide that link again at the end of the session. The survey link can also be found on a live agenda on the ACF IPC website, along with this session's presentation handouts for download. Finally, as a quick reminder, all workshop sessions are being recorded for on-demand viewing via the 2022 ACF IPC website until April 25th. Please visit the live agenda page if you would like to view these recordings after the conference. I'll now turn it over to our ACF workshop facilitator, Melissa, to begin.
Thank you, Chelsea, for that overview. I am going to turn off my camera just to facilitate the presentation during this time, but assured you will still be hearing from me and also getting to, hold on, I advanced it too quickly. So let's get started with our workshop. The first items we want to talk about is who is OCSE, also known as the Office of Child Support Enforcement. We'll cover the history of the Tribal Child Support Program and its current state. We'll define child support and a few other key terms that you'll hear us use throughout today. We'll talk about what child support programs do specifically and what is required to operate a child support program, as well as how do you even get started. You'll also hear from two tribal child support directors on the benefits of having a program and how it is impactful for their communities. And we will allow time at the end for questions. If you're ever curious, that's what our building looks like in DC. So OCSE is the federal agency that administers the National Child Support Enforcement Program. This program was authorized by Title 4D of the Social Security Act back in 1975. You'll also often hear of us refer to our program as a 4D program, or the cases within our program as being 4D cases, and that comes from being part of Title 4D of the Social Security Act. OCSE is one of 18 program offices within the Administration for Children and Families, which is also located within the Department for Health and Human Services. OCSE has a central office in Washington, D.C., and 10 regional offices that are located in Boston, New York, Philadelphia, Atlanta, Chicago, Dallas, Kansas City, Denver, San Francisco, and Seattle. And I'm thrilled to work with all of our regional office staff. Our commissioner is Tangela Gray. OCSE's core mission is dedicated to establishing paternity and obtaining child support in order to encourage responsible parenting, family self-sufficiency, and child well-being, and to recognize the essential role of both parents in supporting their children. The National Child Support Program assures that assistance in obtaining support is available to children through locating parents, establishing paternity, establishing and modifying support obligations, and monitoring and enforcing those. The Federal Office of Child Support Enforcement partners with those state, tribal, and local governments as they work directly with the families. So I'll briefly give a little overview of our tribal child support program's history. So this chart just gives you a bit of a visual of how things started. As I mentioned, we started in 1975 with the Title 40 of the Social Security Act, and that required states to establish their own individual child support collection agencies. However, tribes were not included in this legislation. So during that time period, the tribes would enter into cooperative agreements with the states to help carry out 4D activities and services. It allowed the tribes to have some say in how services were carried out in their land and with their communities. In 1996, the Personal Responsibility and Work Opportunity Reconciliation Act was passed. We call it PRORA. And at this time, it authorized funding for tribal child support. However, there were no regulations in place yet, so funding was provided through special improvement project grants to 7 tribes, and 3 tribes that collaborated with states also received grant funding. From 1998 to 2000, consultation sessions were held before the drafting of the Notice of Proposed Rule. We also call the Notice of Proposed Rule an NPRM. That NPRM and the interim final rule was from 2000 to 2004, with our final regulations coming about in March of 2004. This allowed federally recognized tribes to apply for and receive funding to operate child support enforcement programs consistent with tribal laws and customs. The tribal regulations balance tribal flexibility with requirements that result in effective and efficient child support enforcement programs. They also incorporate tribal values and culture into the regulations. So what's happened with the growth of our program? As you can see from this chart, regulations, as I mentioned, were finalized in 2004. By 2008, we had 23 programs, which has now grown to 60 comprehensive tribal child support programs that have 57,000 cases, and collections in 2020 were $57.8 million. That's a lot of support for families. So if you're curious, where are all the tribal child support programs? This map gives you a good idea of where our programs are located. We currently, as I mentioned, have 60 comprehensive tribal child support programs operating, establishing and enforcing child support orders, and establishing paternity. We also have 1 tribe that is in startup. During the period of startup, that tribe is working to establish codes, policies, and procedures to become a comprehensive program. Now I'd like to talk about some of the terms you're going to hear used today. So child support, very simply, is just when a parent or custodian that's living with the child receives a payment from another parent who's not residing in that same household. The purpose of the payment is to maintain the child's well-being. Some tribes do allow for non-cash payments. It doesn't always have to be cash for the child support. Some examples of what could be a non-cash payment include firewood, venison, and salmon, for instance. You'll hear us talk about custodial parents or the custodial party. That's the person who has the primary care, custody, and control of the child. It can be a relative. It doesn't necessarily have to be an actual birth parent. A non-custodial parent is the person who does not have primary care, custody, or control of the child, and who would have an obligation to pay child support. Now that we've talked about what the Office of Child Support Enforcement does, what do the tribal child support programs do? So they administer the programs. They locate custodial, non-custodial parents. They work to establish parentage, fatherhood, and paternity, offering genetic testing or opportunities to voluntarily acknowledge that paternity. They establish, modify, and enforce orders for child support. And then they distribute and disperse the child support payments that they've collected from the appropriate parties. Some benefits of a tribal child support program are that it really serves the families in your communities. It provides an opportunity also to partner with other programs and agencies to help refer non-custodial parents for assistance in job training and placement or employment. You can help establish paternity that provides fathers an opportunity to participate in meaningful ways in their children's lives. And it provides a child support office that can safely handle the issue of support when there are situations with parties that have experienced family violence. And I will be turning it over now to Chad Sawyer.
Thanks, Melissa. In the next few slides, I'll provide a broad overview of the Tribal Child Support Program. Next slide. Like other ACF grants, federally recognized tribes or tribal organizations are eligible to apply for funding to operate a child support program. You must have at least 100 children under the age of majority defined by your tribal law or code, subject to the jurisdiction of the tribal court or administrative agency. Tribes that have less than 100 children may request a waiver of this requirement. Please contact OCSC to discuss this waiver and the information needed in the request. Thank you. Next slide. The program has two types of funding that we provide directly to tribes: startup funding and comprehensive funding. Next slide. Slide 17 contains a diagram of the program funding and indicates when a non-federal share is required. We provide 100% of the funding for the startup phase without a tribal contribution requirement. Tribes in the startup phase receive $500,000 over a 2-year period, usually $250,000 per year. Comprehensive funding has 2 phases. For years 1 through 3 of operating a comprehensive child support program, the grant covers 90% of allowable expenditures, and the tribe contributes 10%. During the 4th year and thereafter, the grant covers 80% of allowable expenditures, and the tribe contributes 20%. Please note that comprehensive funding has a gradual increase in the tribal contribution from 10% to 20%. This is also known as the non-federal share. A tribe may provide the non-federal share through cash or in-kind contributions. Next slide. So what is the startup phase? In this phase, a tribe builds their capacity to operate a child support program by identifying existing or needed resources to comply with program requirements, revising, adopting, or developing laws, policies, or procedures, and hiring and training staff. Applying for startup funding has several components. You'll begin by researching and analyzing existing laws, codes, policies, and procedures applicable to the child support to determine gaps. Then you will create a program development plan and write the application in accordance with 45 CFR 309-16. The program development plan describes the specific steps you will take to meet the 14 program requirements described in 45 CFR 309-65A and the timeframes associated with each step. Additionally, you'll propose a budget for year 1. Finally, you will assemble and organize all the required documents and submit your startup funding application. Next slide. As I mentioned previously, we provide $500,000 for startup funding over a 2-year period and permit no cost extensions. Before the second year of startup, a tribe must submit a progress report of accomplishments to date and a second year budget. A tribe must also submit quarterly expenditure reports. OCSC provides technical assistance to a tribe regarding their startup application, budget, and program reports. I include hyperlinks to the applicable regulation and policy guidance on slide 19. Next slide. I want to first acknowledge that the startup phase is optional and based upon whether a tribe currently meets the requirements for comprehensive funding. The comprehensive program application is described in 45 CFR 309-15. It includes the tribal 4D plan and the 14 core program requirements. Tribes must include documentation on how they meet the 14 requirements, which I will discuss later in the presentation. OCSC's regional office staff can assist you in developing your application and ensuring that you have included the necessary documents and information. Once OCSC approves your comprehensive funding application, significant or material changes to the Tribal 4D plan requires a plan amendment. For example, if you update your laws on paternity establishment, you will need to submit those proposed changes to OCSC for review and approval. To receive funding for each fiscal year, you'll submit a budget with the required financial forms and documents such as contracts. Tribal child support programs are also required to submit financial and program data reports due either quarterly or annually. And this may seem like a lot, but when you hear from Amy and Linda, they'll tell you how they manage all of that each year and day to day. OCSC routinely provides individual, regional, and national training to tribal child support programs. We work in collaboration with tribal directors and the Tribal Child Support Program Associations to develop and deliver training. We offer tailored and tribally centered technical assistance. So if you choose to start a child support program, we are here to help you. On this slide, I've included references for additional information. Next slide. Now I'll discuss the 14 core requirements and hopefully further spark your interest in applying for and operating a tribal child support program. Next slide. And you've heard some of this before with Melissa in her presentation, so I'll say some new things and then repeat some information as well. So tribes may develop their tribal child support programs based upon their values and cultural traditions. A population description is a narrative about the people under the jurisdiction of the tribal court or administrative agency for child support enforcement purposes. Oftentimes, this includes tribal members who live on or off tribal land or anyone who submits to the jurisdiction of the tribe. Application procedures address how you accept all applications and promptly provide services. This includes outreach activities and procedures for accepting referrals. Your laws, policies, and procedures regarding child support must protect the due process rights of individuals. For example, before offsetting federal tax refunds, you have to issue a notice to inform the non-custodial parent that you're about to offset their refund. There are several provisions under the required administrative and management procedures, which include a description of the child support agency and the procedures for sending notices of support collected to families. The child support program receives and maintains confidential information from families in their caseload. Tribes must have procedures to safeguard this information and to ensure proper use and disclosure and sanctions for violations. Next slide. The regulation describes a few requirements for records maintenance to track and report on child support data, payments, and grant funds. The Tribal 4D plan includes copies of tribal laws and codes to demonstrate compliance with the regulations. Locate procedures describe how a tribe will find non-custodial parents and their assets. For example, the child support program may use different methods to obtain a non-custodial parent's address. such as contacting the tribal membership department or using the Federal Parent Locator Service. Establishing paternity is an essential step in the child support process. Tribes may establish paternity using a process defined in law, code, and/or custom. The regulation has several required procedures, such as providing an opportunity for voluntary acknowledgement and mandating genetic testing in a contested paternity case. Tribes must have one set of child support guidelines by law or tribunal for setting and modifying child support obligations. This includes deciding whether to permit non-cash payments to satisfy support obligations. And Melissa mentioned a few, such as the non-custodial parent providing a barrel of fish when fishing season is in. Next slide. Nationally, about 65% of child support was collected through income withholding. Tribes must have the required income withholding procedures in their laws. Distribution procedures address allocating the collected support to applicable areas such as current support or arrearages. A tribal child support program may work with the state child support program to process a child support case, which is called an intergovernmental case. Tribes must have procedures to process such cases. Lastly, tribes must determine performance targets for the required data elements such as support establishment and other ones they want to track and report on. The required data elements are included in OCSC's annual report to Congress. Next slide. Section 309-145 describes several allowable program costs to fund activities such as developing policies, training staff, locating non-custodial parents, paying for genetic testing, and buying office supplies. Section 310-20 describes the allowable costs for computerized systems and office automation. Review the references for more information. Next slide. Section 309-155 describes the unallowable program costs, such as construction, reimbursed fees, and jailing parents. See the regulations for more information, and you can also contact OCSC if you have questions. Now I'll turn it back over to Melissa.
Thank you, Chad. So we do provide many of the references on this slide that Chad also utilized during his conversation with you. I would like to now turn it over and provide an opportunity for our tribal child support directors to share their perspective on operating a program and also the benefits. The first person I'll turn it over to is Linda Moser-Buse. Linda?
I'm just, okay, hi, I'm not sure, can you hear me?
Yes,
I'm on my phone because I turned off my video and everything and now I turned it back on, but it's not showing. So I'm just gonna go ahead and talk. My name is Linda Moser-Buse. I'm the director of the Ho-Chunk Nation Child Support Agency. Prior to coming over to the tribe, however, I did work in the state child support agency for 14 years before the Ho-Chunk Nation even requested their startup grant. So as soon as they got their startup grant, I jumped ship and came over to the nation. But I had that knowledge of, I knew what was going on the state side, so that helped me. One of the first things, and these are just best practices that have helped me tremendously, is talk to other tribes. I love talking to the feds. The feds always have the legal stuff that they're laying out, but the practical, how do I do this? How do I get people to talk about this? Or how do I find this information? You're going to get tremendous amount of information just talking to other directors who have done it, who have made mistakes and have learned from their mistakes. That's my best way of learning. So I would definitely recommend you talk to other tribes in your area. The National Tribal Child Support Association has a training, an annual training that they do every year, and there is a federal track. So not only can you talk and get to know other tribal directors, but you really want to get to know the feds on a one-on-one, and they do spend some time with the budget. They're willing to even meet with you during breaks to do your budget. That's where I do my budget every year. I just bring it with me and say, I need help because I want it to pass. I don't want questions to come back later on. In the budget process, when you're just in startup, it's not so bad because it's 100% funded. You get the $500,000 to do your develop your child support program. And even when you get to 10% in kind, that doesn't even sound threatening. But when you have to get to the 20% in kind, when you put it down in numbers, it's a little intimidating. And I have had learned that you have to think outside the box, ask how other directors do it, get suggestions, and they always have suggestions at a lot of these conferences as to do how to in kind, because that's going to help you the most. Some of the advantages that we have from having our tribe is before COVID, we were a per capita tribe. And we had per capita that could be garnished for child support. On the state side, when we would send in income withholding orders to the tribe, they didn't have a child support agency, so they just honored whatever we sent in. And we used their per cap to pay anything that was open, to pay child support arrears, interest, fees, cost, whatever was open for that person. Well, when I became started with the child support agency, and there were codes and laws that the Ho-Chunk Nation set into place, how that money can be spent. Because I had the knowledge of how the state was doing it, I was able to pull in the state of Wisconsin and say, look, these are our laws and this is our money. So you have to apply our money the way that our laws say. And I was able to work with the state, and we got it set down to now the money from the per capita or from my wages, if it's tribal funds, it is spent and handed down the hierarchy based on the tribal laws. So that is a good push for the tribe, especially if you are a per cap tribe. You don't want, I mean, you have the money, that's great, but they do need to abide by your laws, not the state's laws. And your laws have already been approved because you have this startup comprehensive plan. So you do have laws that you have to follow. It's just, it helps you to bring it in and to take a little bit more control, to be control of your tribe. Also, as a tribal child support agency, much lower caseload. Each of my workers have about 350 cases. When I worked for the county, I had 962 cases. So if someone wanted to reach me when I worked for the county, they'd have to leave a message. But for the most part, when people call here, I can answer the phone. I can talk to them. I can be personal. They can actually get to know me. And one thing I have discovered is when they talk to the worker and they get to know the worker and they actually get to be involved with the stipulation and establishing and deciding how their case is going to be written up, their orders, they're much more likely to comply with them. And if there's a problem, they don't seem to have a problem calling and saying, hey, that's what we set for our order, but we're not going to make it. We just can't do it. And especially with COVID came in, we were able to meet with them, and it was more personable. And I think that the more cooperation you get from non-custodial and custodial parents, the better your program is going to succeed, even if it's not a lot of money, because COVID, my collections have gone way down, but the people are trying. And in my opinion, when you get two parents helping to raise a child, even if there's no money involved, that child has a much better chance of a great success. So that, to me, that's what this program is doing for our agency and for our tribe. That's all.
Thank you, Linda. I'll turn it over now to Amy Turner. Amy's with the Delaware Tribe of Indians. Amy, do you want to share your perspective?
I would love to. Thank you for having me, and thank you everybody who joined this session. I see a lot of familiar names, and just seeing names warms my heart because I miss everybody. I would say if you're here and you're considering tribal child support for your tribe, Chad is an amazing person and I love working with him, but his job is policy, and it can be a little overwhelming in the beginning. And so just know that it'll be all right. And the thing I can say about OCSE, I love seeing their names here in this session because we're like a child support family. There are things in the tribal world that we share, obviously with the states, but then nationwide, and the majority of them, unlike in some other federal organizations, they understand the tribal world, and we say they just just get it. They understand, and they're rooting for us as sovereign nations and honoring our customs and traditions. And so props to OCSE for that. You guys are great to work with. And the first time when I started working in tribal child support a few years ago, it was, I thought it was like an audit, because our program manager was coming up from Dallas. We're in Region 6, and came up, and I was like, oh no, like we're going to be in trouble, and this is going to be an audit. And it wasn't that at all. He just wanted to come up and see our office space, meet the staff, see if we had any questions, go over some, pending changes. And it really, someone said to me early on that the OCSE team is really there, like they want us to succeed, and they want us to be a powerful program. And that's the way I've always felt. And so even if you didn't have the federal support, which you will, the tribes, like Linda was saying, the tribes really have formed a great bond. The National Tribal Directors Association, which you can go to that website, natcsd.com.org. My bad, I probably shouldn't say it until I know what it is. Anyway, it's a helpful resource where you can find other programs. And then I'm in Oklahoma, and I believe we have 9 tribal child support programs. And probably over 10, 12 years ago, directors started just realizing that the national conferences were great, and getting together with directors from other nations in the US was helpful. We had regional issues or projects that we wanted to address. And so we formed an association in Oklahoma called the Oklahoma Tribal Child Support Association, OTCSA. And we meet every year. We have bylaws, and we have board and committees. And it really has been, I think we've been in full operation with that for about 6 years. And it has been a labor of love to get it established, but it's really great. And so when we have that, we invite all the tribes in Region 6 to join us. We sometimes invite state directors in our region. We invite our program managers for our region, and then those from central office. And we've had the commissioner appear at those more times than not, which is really helpful to be in a smaller room with the people who know, what's happening on a federal level. So, and then at our first ever OTCSA meeting, several of our smaller programs in the north central area of Oklahoma just started getting together and asking questions, what do you do in this situation? And who do you use for process serving and that? And we decided to form our own little informal alliance where we meet quarterly. We used to meet quarterly in person, and what we took turns with the tribes hosting, and we would share a meal together and have some topics to update, each other on, and then ask questions. And if needed, kind of do breakout after that, as far as, financial people want to, ask finance questions. And sometimes those questions make the other of us crazy and makes our eyes roll and confusion sets in. So I like Linda said, I 100% agree that the tribal support you're going to get from other tribal child support programs. Like, I just can't imagine one that you would reach out to for help and not get a warm welcome or an invitation to come visit. And that probably, I have several notes here, but my number one recommendation is, if you're considering it, or if you're going through the startup during that time, or before you commit as a tribe, go visit the programs, and ask them, in the beginning, you don't know what questions to ask, but again, you can lean on us and OCSE for support, but just, watching the process and seeing how they do it, and asking, what's the best part about your program, what maybe is the worst part about your program, or what are your challenges, and then following them. If you could spend a few days just following them on the ins and outs, it really will give you a better understanding of what tribal child support is and what all it entails. And I think following that tribe to courts, setting in with them in courts and watching that process is also helpful, because that will be a big part of your program, obviously. So other advice, when you go, I mean, I came in at the tail end of a startup program, but I know there were a lot of things we didn't necessarily know how to do it or what to do. And so we went down a road and then later had to change it. And so I think that's where, leaning on your relative programs is really helpful. What kind of folders do they use? What kind of database do they use? Who's going to do what, as far as, are you going to have, what we call cradle to grave? You're going to take the case when it first comes in and it's going to be my case throughout as a child support specialist, or are we going to have a finance division, and then we're going to have a case specialist division, and what that looks like. But like Linda said, the relationships that you build with your clients or your customers, your participants, whatever you call them, it in a thankless job, it really is a bright spot. And she's absolutely correct. Those relationships, having that open communication and relaying to them that you have an attorney and you are an enforcement program, which we try to stay away from that language, the enforcement language. But we're not here for the custodial parent. We're not here for the non-custodial parent. Our attorneys don't work for one or the other. We're here for the whole of to represent the tribe and the tribe's interest, which is our tribal kiddos. Our program is fairly small. We have a full-time finance specialist and a full-time case specialist. And then we have about 3 people, I think off the top of my head, that are paid a little bit out of the program that contribute in other ways. Like my salary as the director of the division, and then also our administrative assistant. And like, let's see. Our OTCSA conference that I mentioned, the Oklahoma Regional Conference, we have one conference a year, and then halfway through the year, we'll do a virtual or in-person all-day training. And the trainings that we do are free and open to all the members. The membership to our association is low cost. And if you're considering the program for your tribe, definitely find out where conferences are or meetings, and you will be welcomed with open arms to soak up all the knowledge that's shared in those spaces. I don't think I have anything else. I don't want to monopolize the time, so I'll hand it back over to you, Melissa.
All right, thank you, Amy, and thank you, Linda. As Amy mentioned, OCSE, we're here to help with regulation and policy compliance, but they really are the boots on the ground that can tell you how to get the work done, because they are that front line. And I know, Linda, you have your hand raised. Was there something else you wanted to add?
Actually, I was just looking at the chat, and there was someone that had asked if they're a smaller tribe, can they join other tribes that already have an agency? And I do know in Oklahoma, I thought that there was a consortium with more than one tribe, so I thought maybe you could touch on that.
Yes, I saw that question too. We do allow consortiums so that smaller tribes might want to cooperate and work in tandem with other tribes. And I think the tribe that Linda's referencing is Modoc Nation. By last count, I believe they had close to 20 other tribes that partner with them, and they provide child support services through their grant, and that services multiple tribes. So that is certainly an opportunity. And we do have some other tribes that have 4D programs that are looking at creating a consortium as well to join with others. So that is always an option. That yes, we would be happy to help, and we can put you in contact with directors that have done so. So I do want to share just a few more items. We had some resources. These are, again, a lot of the same resources that may have previously been mentioned If you go to the tribal agencies page, you'll find resources that are specific for our tribal child support programs, including a link to contact information for all of the tribal child support directors. So if you're wanting to get in touch with the tribal child support program, you can always reach there and find them. And then Amy mentioned the National Association of Tribal Child Support Directors. I tried to put this slide up, Amy, when you were trying to remember what the website was. So the National Association of Tribal Child Support Directors website is found here. The National Tribal Child Support Association website is the top one listed. They have a conference coming up in June that will be in Catoosa, Oklahoma, which is right at around Tulsa, Oklahoma. So if you go to that website, you can find information for that conference that will be upcoming as well. And I do want to take time if we have any other questions. Chelsea, can you assist if there's any other questions in the chat box or in the Q&A? Or if anyone wants to raise their hand, we'll certainly field any questions at this point.
There are no questions in the chat.
I see some of our other tribal child support directors are on the line. Jennifer, good to see you joining us today. And I know Jennifer would always be happy to be a resource, having gone through the startup process fairly recently as well. I do want to share contact information. So if you have any follow-up questions and you don't want to ask them right now, or if they come to you later, please feel free to reach out. My contact information is there along with Chad, Linda, and Amy's. I do see that we have another question asking if consortia are permitted and can a tribe agree to work with another tribe? Yes, consortiums are permitted. We do have those that exist right now. We have another tribe that's pursuing that with some nearby smaller tribal offices as well. So that is something that is certainly allowable, and you can work with an existing 4D tribe, or if you wanted to create a program and then bring in other tribes to join with you, that either one would be perfectly acceptable with OCSE and in line with our regulations. Thank you for the question. Are there any more? All right. Well, again, please feel to reach out to us if you have any questions. I do see another one that's come in. Would each tribe need to have the 100 child count, or the consortia could count together? So the tribe that would apply for the 4D program has that program requirement of 100 children. However, as Chad, I believe, mentioned in his discussion, there is an opportunity to have that waived. So if your tribe is small and you can't meet the 100 children requirement, that would be something that could be discussed with us and could be part of a waiver. Great questions.
Can I chime in on the consortia question?
Yes, and I think Chad wants to as well. So please go ahead, Amy.
Okay, it seems like there's there's lots of questions, so there's some interest there. And I think I worked for a program, another tribe that had child support, and we established agreements with 3 other tribes to have to basically facilitate their child support program. And so for a tribe looking to have a tribal child support program, it's one of the best ways to recognize your sovereignty and to build your court and recognize the impact that the court can have on tribal families. And so with a consortia, you can take those cases to those tribes courts if that's part of your agreement. And that way they're still maintaining their sovereignty. You're basically doing the administrative work, but they handle those cases judicially.
Thank you, Amy. And Chad, I know you wanted to add something as well.
Just that although it's not a consortium, but the tribal organization that's made up of several tribes can together reach that 100 threshold under that tribal organization's law governing and subject to the jurisdiction, etc. But I just want to just put that out there too. Although it's not consortium, it is tribal organization.
Thank you, Chad. I don't know that we covered that much in our presentation about being a tribe or tribal organization, but that is an opportunity as well as a tribal organization. So I'm just looking at the newest comment that's come in the chat. Providing legal services to non-custodial parents is unallowable. So I think, as Amy mentioned, I'm looking at your question. So you're inferring that providing legal services to custodial is allowable and non-custodial is not allowable. So I think Amy mentioned you do not represent the custodial parent or the non-custodial parent. You're representing your tribe, your 4D agency in any court or administrative type hearings. There are opportunities that non-custodial parents can ask for services. They may ask for paternity to be established. They may ask for a child support order to be established. They may ask for a child support to be modified. So those are all still services that are provided by the 4D program. And even though the request is coming from the non-custodial parent. So it's not necessarily that you're providing services just to one or the other. You're providing the necessary services for that establishment of paternity and an order and the appropriate amount of the order. I hope that clarifies that.
Melissa, can I add something? This is Linda.
Sure, sure.
On our applications, and I got this from other tribes too, there is a statement, we call it a statement of understanding, where whoever is applying for services does fill out, sign their name saying that they understand that the attorney that we have at the child support agency represents the interests of the Ho-Chunk Nation child support agency and not one parent or the other. And that also is a small clip on most of our letters that go out, just so that there isn't confusion, because when we do offer paternity establishment services, people are thinking that we're actually representing them, but we're not. And so we try to make that as clear as we can. It does kind of muddy itself sometimes when we tell someone you need to, fill out this application and feel like this. We're really not giving legal advice. We're just telling them how to get the services. Does that help?
That helps. And I wanted to go back to the slide that caused the question. So unallowable costs would be legal counsel for non-custodial parents or guardian ad litem, I think is the slide that caused the question. So this means we can't pay for like a defense attorney for that non-custodial parent if you've brought an action to establish child support. We would provide the service, or the child support program would provide the service of establishing an order, but you can't pay for an attorney to represent that non-custodial parents, what we're meaning by that statement on this slide. I think that's the one that was causing the confusion.
Can I also add to that, Melissa?
Sure.
Just to build on that, that's part of, for me and my experience in tribal child support, that's part of the conversation that you can lead with for non-custodial parents. Because, or not non-custodial parents, but whoever's not applying, sometimes the non-custodial person is the one who's applying for services from the program. So whoever's not applying feels like they're being served, or they're being attacked in this way. And so part of my opening comments as far as like explaining how the process goes is saying that exactly that we have an attorney that works for our program that represents the interest of the tribe. It's not the opposing party's attorney. And so, and just trying to build that relationship with them from the beginning, as far as trying to keep it less adversarial as possible. And like Linda said, getting to a place, which happens a lot actually, where the parents can co-parent in a way that they didn't before they started utilizing our services. And I also want to, I don't know how much time we have, but as a director of a division of Family and Children Services, which includes child welfare and domestic violence, I definitely want to give a shout out for our domestic violence advocates. Have attended some child support training so that they would be kind of aware of what the child support program is. They hear a lot about it, but I'm sure, you know, they're not specialists in that way. But we get a lot of referrals from our domestic violence program in that way. And also, you know, our child welfare, sometimes those come in as prevention cases or PSSF. And so being able to have that conversation with them as far as, we can transfer your state case, your non-paying state case to us, let us help you. Oh, you can't get a hold of your worker at the state. Yeah, they're really, really overwhelmed. But if you call here, you're going to speak with someone who knows about child support. Or if we're not available, we'll call you right back. Or you'd rather communicate via email, that's fine. We have the flexibility to meet you face to face and not just send you to some, you know, call center or something, which really a one-on-one type of situation.
Thank you, Amy. I think we still have about 8 minutes left, so we're good on time. Are there any more questions? Okay, it's gotten kind of quiet. So I just want to again share contact information for all the presenters today. We're all here to assist if there's anything, if you're considering pursuing a child support program or want more information on what it might look like or entail, we are more than happy to have conversations and visit with you. We appreciate you for attending this day one first workshop of the conference and hope it was informative for you. We would like to thank, I would like to personally thank both Amy and Linda and Chad for joining us today. And I do want to highlight a couple of items. Please, if you can continue to visit the ACF Indigenous Programs Conference website, explore our virtual exhibitor hall to view ACF grant recipient projects from throughout the United States and Pacific Islands. And Chelsea is again going to place the survey link in the chat. We encourage you to please fill out the survey, as those will assist us in future workshops and future conferences. And finally, there is an ACF Resources page that has more information about each ACF program office. We thank you for joining us today. We thank you for your engagement and your questions, and we hope you have a great day and enjoy the conference. Thank you, everyone.